So, Planarcadia is currently home to the remains of Oroboros, the Aeon of Voracity. That's chill, but also not entirely unexpected. Hoyo hasn't exactly been subtle in dropping hints about the Leviathans. I just wasn't quite prepared for the corpse of a god to show up just yet, considering everything else we have going on in our trip to Planarcadia. So with that in mind, I wanted to take a quick trip down memory lane and recap almost everything we know so far about the Voracity, Leviathans, and Ruan Mei's likely involvement in resurrecting them before 4.3 rolls around. As always, spoilers are incoming for the story in Honkai Star Rail's 4.2 patch. Timestamps are in the description below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up to date with my other lore, theory, and opinion videos in the future. Let's start at the very beginning. Prior to the rise of Qlipoth that marked the start of the Amber Eras, there existed a species known as Leviathans. These ancient beings roamed the galaxy feeding on cosmic dust and nebulae until the period of history known as the Dusk Wars, which saw the supposed extinction of the Leviathans. This catastrophic disaster is shrouded in mystery due to Mythos, the Enigmata, intentionally tampering with the records from this point in time. But the IPC also claims that knowledge of the time following the Dusk Wars is a complete blank. And according to Welt and the Simulated Universe devlogs, Qlipoth is one of the oldest known Aeons in the universe. But like many other aspects of Star Rail, there's a little bit of conjecture here, so bear with me for a minute. The IPC claim that when the Preservation ascended, this ended the Dusk Wars, and that the Leviathans ceased to exist from that point on. However, the Intelligentsia Guild states that the period between Amber Era 0 and 180 may not be as blank as the IPC had claimed, due to archaeological discoveries which proved that Leviathans were still around after Qlipoth's ascent. We can also assume that the IPC have something to hide with all of this, as they quickly defunded the Intelligentsia Guild's research into such matters. And on top of all of that, we have the Preservation Devlog 1, which suggests that the oldest known Aeon alongside Qlipoth was Oroboros the Voracity, but we'll get back to them in a sec. Meanwhile, the devlog for the Equilibrium suggests that Ho-Oh and Long the Permanents are also among the oldest of the Aeons. So it seems likely that those three existed prior to the Dusk Wars. Outside all of this incredibly limited information, we really don't know much more about the Leviathans. Thanks, IPC. That said, there are 5 very small and random things we know about them that feel worth mentioning. According to a quest on Herder's space station from 1.0 called Sensitive Beings, some cultures still around today don't actually worship Aeons, and instead practice Leviathan worship. Oh, and prior to the Dusk Wars, Shattered Starbait was used to try and lure Leviathans, and in the simulated universe, Stephen Lloyd tried to do exactly that, but instead ended up attracting a very large number of trotters. Oh, and there's the text readable which states that the Nameless describe the insides of a Leviathan like a gentle starry night sky. Side note, if Leviathans have been missing since around the Dusk Wars, but we have a written record from a Nameless describing characteristics of Leviathans, then this implies that Akavili must have ascended quite early in recorded history, likely during the blank period that the IPC and Mythos are doing a great job of obscuring. Oh, and last thing, Leviathan corpses are used by Nanook's Antimatter Legion as materials to create Void Rager Tramplers and Doomsday Beasts in the Warforge. And one other thing to remember for later is that the Leviathans in our theology and mythology are typically giant sea serpents, and the same is likely true in Star Rail, as the currently denounced Leviathan conception theory mentions that after the Dusk Wars, elder Leviathans were run aground. Whew, okay, with that, I promise I am actually done. That's literally everything we know about these monolithic creatures. So now that we have some context about Leviathans, let's move on to the only known Aeon to have ascended from the species, Oroboros the Voracity. Despite having absurd amounts of information about the rest of the Aeons, Oroboros is a bit of an anomaly. Their databank entry describes them as the Drinker of Worlds, the Unsatisfied Devourer, the Black Hole with Thought, They are an Aeon and a Leviathan at the same time. In the eyes of Oroboros, life is a flickering fragment floating in the sea of void, destined to return to the darkness along with the stars which birthed them. This darkness is within the depths of their mouths. I want to point out that this description feels eerily close to the path concept of Nihility, so just keep that in the back of your mind for now. Beyond their databank entry, the main information we have about Oroboros comes from the Swarm Disaster Simulated Universe, which is starting to feel like required reading for Planarcadia at this point. During the Swarm Disaster, Oroboros devoured countless numbers of Tazaronth's spawn alongside numerous planets and galaxies. To lure their victims, it is said that they used their lantern-like stomach as bait, which matches the description given by the Nameless, as well as their beautiful, alluring singing voice. These ideas all align with the concept of sea sirens, which further reinforces the sea beast theming of the Leviathans. Now, at the peak of the Swarm Disaster, Tazaronth and Oroboros confronted each other in a conflict which lasted 5 amber eras and affected 2/3 of the universe, resulting in the loss of countless lives, planets, and star systems. Interestingly, fully the Remembrance crystallized and preserved the memories of the victims, but yet we still don't have many details about the Voracity. Anyways, the last main detail we have on Oroboros is that during the final phases of the Swarm Disaster War, the Voracity simply vanished along with Enna. The most interesting note about their disappearance is that to end the conflict, Enna extended an invitation to Qlipoth. This much we know to be true, but Herta speculates that Qlipoth likely made a secret deal with Enna about Oroboros, not Tazaronth. And if that speculation is true, then suddenly a few things start to make a bit more sense. Because as we know from 4.2, the Voracity's remains are currently entombed within Ahartopia, a planet currently owned by the IPC, who act in the name of the Amber Lord, with the Phantasmoon Games acting as a seal to presumably satiate their endless hunger. This would likely explain why the period between games fluctuates, as it would depend on how much wish power was consumed to maintain the seal. And this also suggests that the Phantasmoon Games first began around the 1300 Amber Era period, as this is when the Swarm Disaster took place. So there have been hundreds and thousands of years of these elating cycles since the Voracity was contained, which is a really long time. So surely there must have been some hints about this secret hiding in plain sight. Well, this is Hoyo we're talking about, so you bet there are. Oroboros and the Leviathans aren't the only references to gigantic sea creatures on Planarcadia. In fact, we missed something back in 4.0. The other Dean of Graphia Academy, Sea Drake. You know, the giant imaginated sea dragon that's hanging out of the wall attached to some massive paintings. Talking to this character doesn't reveal much on the surface, but the Trailblazer has one very specifically worded line that they can ask Miss Sea Drake, which feels intentional, knowing what we know now about the Voracity's remains. The Trailblazer says, "Have you ever noticed that you tend to talk in circles?" Which isn't the most groundbreaking revelation, but given that symbolically an Oroboros is always depicted as a snake or dragon consuming their own tail to form an endless circle, it feels like a very subtle nod to Planarcadia's hidden secret. Jumping back to the most recent patch though, Seafeld City also contained an interesting readable about Krakens, as well as a report on anomalies from the ocean. Find the Kraken is a folklore interview which highlights some different accounts regarding the trending buzzword Kraken. One report says that it's just a slang word for kitty, and another suggests that it's foodie lingo for octopus. One of the other reports comes from an Imagine NPC giant octopus named Kraken, who you can actually interact with as part of the mission Bring Its Eyes, the one that sees you take the creature's eyes off-world to see the various oceans he claims to have conquered. Interestingly, Kraken says to you that they wish you would take their stomach instead of their eyes, which makes sense given they're a tavern owner and want to experience flavors. But if we look at it through the lens of being an imagine created from humanity's ancient fear of Leviathans, then it starts to take on a bit of a different meaning. Jumping back to find the Kraken, there is one more record included which I think is the most interesting, and it comes from an old fisherman named Santiago. His account is the longest by far and details stories he heard from his grandfather as a child. He described it as a massive, many-tentacled sea siren that excelled at stirring up wind and waves. This Kraken regarded the deep-sea fish as its subjects, and thus viewed fishing boats with hostility, often dragging sailors to the bottom of the sea to bolster the population of its kingdom. There's that terminology again. Sea siren. And I would guess that it isn't luring people away to bolster a kingdom, but rather to satiate its voracity. The other interesting part of his note reads, "Grandfather taught me lots of tricks for spotting Kraken. If long swells rise without wind, it means Kraken is waking from the deep. If seabirds scramble back to shore, they've seen its tentacles," that sort of thing. At the first sign of anything, Grandfather would head straight back to port. He always said that in Seafeld City, there are no fishermen who are both bold and old. So people have started to notice anomalies in the oceans which they attribute to a Kraken, which perfectly leads into the other readable I wanted to mention, titled Ocean Current Anomaly Report. It states that there have been a series of strange occurrences that defy standard explanation with no logical correlation to other natural phenomena. Phantasmoon issues, anyone? First up, the water is experiencing incredibly high salinity and unusually low temperatures, with the article reading, "It is as if, and this is purely a metaphor, some massive and freezing object deep on the ocean floor is displacing the frigid water around it." So it is very likely that the voracity is currently frozen at the bottom of the ocean. And under the heading School of Fish, the rest of the article is completely blacked out, so someone is intentionally withholding the information that lies within. So yeah, something is a bit fishy about the waters of Planarcadia. With all of that context out of the way, we can finally talk about Ruan Mei. Back in 2.6, I remember losing it when we were told that Himiko and Welt didn't attend the war dance ceremony on the Lawfu because they were delivering Leviathan fossils to Ruan Mei. Like, sure, giving the woman devoted to understanding the limits of human life, who tried to resurrect an emanator of the swarm, and who successfully resurrected Ting Yun, as if that's a very normal thing to be able to do. Yeah, let's give her the remains of some ancient beings. That'll have a really chill outcome. Then, in the Anti-Destruction Alliance trailer, at Stephen Lloyd's prompt, Ruan Mei reassures him that she will inform the Intelligentsia Guild about her Leviathan research. So what on earth is everyone planning to do during this Aeonic game under the elating light of the Phantasmoon? Well, I think I have an idea. It's probably wrong, but after all this research, I think it's only fair to speculate on what the purpose of bringing together the remains of a god alongside the company of a scientist known to bend the laws of nature on more than one occasion could be all about. Now let me tell you, I have flip-flopped on this idea so many times because there's just so many things to consider, so let's start with a recap on the most important parts of this puzzle. Planarcadia contains the remains of Oroboros. The Voracity is also a Leviathan. Leviathans are currently being studied by Ruan Mei. Ruan Mei can resurrect life forms, including the propagation. Tazaronth's remains are currently in Lorcha's coffin. Lorcha wants to enact a Godslayer protocol to kill the Abundance. The Abundance currently has ties to Planarcadia. Planarcadia contains the remains of Oroboros. Oh, what do you know? We've made a perfect circle, so now I can fit in the last thing I wanted to say, which is Clipoth likely made a deal with Enna about the Voracity during the Swarm disaster. So what on earth would the IPC want with Oroboros now? Well, to me, I think the hint lies in the mention of Enna, an Aeon whose path was assimilated with another. What if that was a test? And what if everything else I've just mentioned is a distraction to be dealt with at another time? And the real aim here is to kill Oroboros for good by merging them with IX, the Nihility. Since 4.0, I have speculated that the Nihility will play an important role soon, as there've just been too many references to it. So my suspicion here is that the Phantasmoon games have been channeling wish power into Oroboros to dull them, because wish power is both joy and hatred, and similarly, everything and nothing are effectively the same thing. So this wish power has been diluting the veracity enough over countless Amber eras under the watchful eye of the IPC, all in the name of the Amber Lord, to ensure that one day Oroboros could actually die. And now we have a path of Nihility which bears similarity to Veracity's description and could theoretically be assimilated should we utilize Ruan Mei's talents to resurrect Oroboros and end their path for good. Do I think this idea would turn out well? Absolutely not. If by some miracle I was right, then it would likely trigger a reaction which would cause the equilibrium to show up and balance the cosmic scales by splitting a new path of something or other, which would see Ruan Mei likely fulfill her desire to become an Aeon. Now, of course, this is just speculation. There are so many reasons that we could try to revive the veracity, but I just can't seem to make them fit with all the pieces currently laid out on the board. So hopefully the next patch will bring some much needed answers. But there is one last thing I wanted to say before wrapping this video. AHA themselves have stated that this Phantasmoon Games will be different. They will grant their authority not for 1 minute, but permanently. So they are planning to descend from their Aeonic mantle. And once again, we're left with the question of why. What is AHA planning to do? Well, if my theory of merging paths is the right math but the wrong answer, what if the real solution is to merge the elation with the veracity and end their own path? Because they want to grant their power to another like Asset Pramart, only to see it immediately destroyed for their own amusement. Don't forget, the mourning actors were the ones who crafted the supplicant masks in the first place, so a tragic comedy kind of makes a lot of sense. And we've seen in the past that AHA is very willing to be involved in the demise of their fellow Aeons, and wouldn't their own death be the funniest joke of all? So, there you have it. Everything you need to know about Leviathans and Oroboros ahead of the next patch. Plus, you got some random theories from me as well, and regardless of whether they're right or wrong, hopefully you had a bit of fun going on that wild ride with me today. Because a little bit of joy is what AHA would want for us, and if this video did spark joy, don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can keep making more of these. Whatever is in store for the future, I believe we are about to witness a very unpredictable gambit from the elation themselves, and I genuinely cannot wait to see how it all unfolds. If you have any better ideas about what Ruan Mei might be up to with the Leviathans, let me know in the comments. I'm SassQueenAmy, and that was another unhinged deep dive, but it definitely won't be the last, so I will catch you in the next one.